and welcome to Mississippi Insight. I'm Byron Brown. Thank you for joining us. This week is Greta Kemp Martin's turn in the spotlight. We spoke one-on-one with Attorney General Lynn Fitch last week. Now the Democratic candidate lets loose with criticism of the Republican incumbent's time in office. We'll talk about abortion policy, campaign finance law, strategies for curbing violence, and more. Our latest candidate interview is straight ahead this Sunday on Mississippi Insight. Political observers may be forgiven for not recognizing the name Greta Kemp Martin. The Tishomingo County native and attorney is the litigation director for Disability Rights Mississippi, an active member of the Mississippi Bar. And this is Kemp's first run at state office. She has an uphill battle on November 7th against Attorney General Lynn Fitch. And though she may be running far behind Fitch in campaign funding, she insists that she can beat the odds and move a Democrat back into the AG's office. Martin spoke last week with 12 News' senior political correspondent, Richard Lake.
Now, you're a well-experienced attorney, but you're a relative newcomer to politics. Can you talk to me about what spurred this campaign?
So I truly believe that Mississippians have had a history of being underrepresented by their state leaders, and Mississippians deserve better. I'm a lifelong Mississippian, hailed from Tishomingo County up in the northeast corner of the state, and I have felt for far too long that our state has needed leaders that will come out and fight for our state. Not worry about what's going on outside and across the country, but what's happening right here at home. And so I jumped in this race because I've represented people my whole career and I enjoy doing it, and I believe that I would be wonderful to replace and represent the people of Mississippi.
Many topics to go over today. Let's start with abortion. What do you believe should be the role of Attorney General when it comes to abortion in Mississippi?
So I'll say this, whether it be Attorney General, Governor, the government has no place in people's health care decision making, period. And that could be about abortion, that could be about vaccines, that could be about birth control. That is just government overreach at its finest. So, you know, with the Dobbs case, what I think people tend to overlook is that it's not just about abortion. It can bleed into many different healthcare decisions. And the last thing we want to do in a state like Mississippi where healthcare is such a concern, we do not want to set up a situation where physicians feel like they have to call their lawyers before they provide care to their patients. And, you know, look, I'm not out here trying to make people believe certain things about abortion. Nobody's going to change my mind about what I think about it. I'm not out here trying to change anybody else's. But at the end of the day, I truly believe you can be pro-life and be anti-Dobbs, because Dobbs sets such a dangerous precedent for health care across the board.
If elected, how would you address the issue of abortion in Mississippi? Well,
you know, Dobbs is the law of the land, and the Supreme Court made that decision, and we have to follow the law. And I'm very much aware that I may not have the opportunity to change that as the Mississippi Attorney General, but what I can promise is that when you have Greta Martin as your Attorney General, physicians are not going to have to worry about being criminalized. Women are not going to worry about being criminalized. And as my opponent has indicated, her intent to track medical records across state lines, that's not a priority for me and my administration. My concern is the issues here in Mississippi that we need to address, and that's our failing healthcare system. That's corruption across our state. We have enough going on here that we do not need to be following women or people outside of the state when they try to get care they cannot get here in the state.
You mentioned Attorney General Fitch's strategy. She's tried to really, try to attempt to ban nearly all abortions in Mississippi. What do you make of that strategy?
Well, again, I don't believe that government has any position making healthcare decisions. I mean, with all due respect to General Fitch and Governor Reeves and other state leaders, they are the last people that I want to be providing any medical advice to me or my physician. So I think that it's these state leaders are putting forth an extremist agenda that allows them to step inside people's doctor's offices, people's bedrooms, people's medical records, tracking people's phones. I mean, I think it's an extremist position that goes beyond the issue of abortion. It can bleed over into any controversial medical procedure or any medical procedure that they deem controversial, and I think it's a dangerous precedent.
Mississippi has the nation's highest rate of infant mortality. That's the death rate of babies under 1 year of age. We have the second highest rate of maternal mortality after Arkansas. What can you do as Attorney General to better serve mothers and babies?
So I think it goes far beyond the development of a database that doesn't serve part of our state. I think day one, we have to address our failing healthcare system, which is why I'm very supportive of Brandon Presley as governor, because he has made that promise to look into the expansion of Medicaid. And so what I hope to do as Attorney General is support his promise to expand Medicaid through executive order, because we have seen people question whether that can be done by a governor. So I'm very supportive of the expansion of Medicaid, and I would position my office to be as supportive of that movement as possible, because overall we're seeing rural hospitals close, we're seeing doctors flee this state. We have to address the problem from the bottom, and that is reconstructing and building up a stronger healthcare system in Mississippi.
Mm-hmm. That database you mentioned, Attorney General Fitch recently launched the MAMA initiative. That's Mississippi Access to Maternal Assistance. It provides new and expecting mothers resources, including where to find health care, financial assistance, and shelter. What do you make of that initiative? Is that enough to address what Mississippi mothers and babies are going through right now?
No, because as General Fitch said herself repeatedly, these are not new resources. These are resources that have been available to Mississippians for quite some time. And they're wonderful, right, for the most part. They're overworked, underfunded resources that have been providing support to mothers and families for quite some time. Just the fact that you compiled them in one place on the internet does not mean that you have solved the problems that we have in this state. And keep in mind, there's several problems with this database. I know that it's been labeled as an organic, it's ever changing, but right now there's no services that are outlined in this database for the Delta, which is one of the areas of the state that has the highest infant and maternal mortality rates. My problem with this is this doesn't seem to be something that the Attorney General should be focused on. This seemed like a database that might have been more appropriate coming from the Department of Human Services or something like that. But at the end of the day, you can't compile the services and the support that we already had in place here and put it on the internet and think that that's going to solve our problems. It's just not. It's a great tool, and I commend General Fitch for pulling that together. But I can't see how that's going to help us reduce these mortality rates when we have work here in Mississippi that needs to be done.
Many of the themes we discussed with Martin track those we interviewed General Fitch about. We'll continue that line of questioning with the Democratic candidate for Attorney General when Mississippi Insight continues.
General Fitch told 12 News last week that an investigation into Senator Chris McDaniel's campaign finances is ongoing, but declined to discuss any specifics. What do you make of this situation, and should the AG's office be more active in investigating campaign finance violations?
100%. There is a portion of General Fitch's interview that I agree with, and it's that our campaign finance laws need to be reformed. There is very little teeth in those laws, but the teeth that exist through the Attorney General's office. Now, Lieutenant Governor Hosemann filed this complaint regarding Senator Chris McDaniel in March of this year, well before the primary election, about a primary opponent. And it wasn't until 4 days before the primary when Attorney General Fitch launched her investigation. And as we sit here today, 2 months out, she still can't comment. She still can't tell us what the resolution is. I think there's just a sense of urgency that this Attorney General's office misses. When you had months to investigate a primary candidate's campaign finance violations or alleged violations, I think it should take priority so that it would be resolved before the primary election so that Mississippians will know who they're voting for. I don't know how it would have changed the vote. It might not have at all. And look, I don't know what Senator Chris McDaniel's campaign finance issues are, but it's the Attorney General's job to get that resolved as quickly as possible. And Lieutenant Governor Hosemann gave her plenty of time before the primary to get that resolved so that Mississippians would know that outcome early enough.
Would you support changes on the enforcement aspect, and if so, what changes?
I would 100%. I think that right now, only having the Attorney General as the minimal enforcement authority for campaign finance is probably not enough, correct? And I know that Secretary Watson has mentioned that his office, if he is reelected, intends to pursue stronger enforcement through the Secretary of State. And I would be supportive of that. I think it takes a team to ensure that Mississippi's elections and campaigns are fair fair and just. And so I think that this should be a large priority for our legislature, and I think that they should work alongside the AG, the Ethics Commission, and the Secretary of State to ensure that there is, a robust enforcement plan in place when people violate our campaign finance laws.
6 former Rankin County deputies who called themselves the Goon Squad pleaded guilty to state charges stemming from the torture and abuse of 2 black men. If elected, what would you do to address the issues inside the Rankin County Sheriff's Department, and how would your office deal with possible future instances of police misconduct?
So I know this is a very delicate balance between being an ally for law enforcement and also understanding that there should be oversight on police misconduct. I'm the daughter and granddaughter of police officers, and so I understand the law enforcement community in a very unique way. But when you have the allegations and the evidence that is coming out of what we're seeing in Rankin County to show just this horrific incident of police misconduct, you can't sit on your laurels and wait for the federal government to intervene, which is exactly what Attorney General Fitch did. I think one of the images that will stick with me is one of the victim's mothers standing outside the Attorney General's office, begging her to pay attention, begging her to talk to them, to talk to the victim about this incident. And it was not until the federal government intervened that Attorney General Fitch filed charges. And that is too long. The Attorney General should be proactive, should not wait for that federal government intervention, should absolutely listen when these allegations of police misconduct arise. And look, I was a private attorney before I started working in the area where I am now with disability rights, and I have litigated allegations out of Rankin County Police Department as early as 2011. So these were prevalent things that people knew about and reporting to the AG's office. And we're seeing that even as recent as Jim Hood had knowledge of what was going in Rankin County. And I think waiting for the federal government or anyone else to come in and file charges first is too long.
If elected, would you continue the investigation into Rankin County Sheriff Brian Bailey and his alleged misuse of police powers to spy on his girlfriend?
100%. Before those allegations came to light, we held a press conference where I publicly called for Sheriff Bailey's resignation, because just the allegations of what happened with the Rankin County Goon Squad, I believe, is enough that the sheriff should step down. And of course, we have seen the undersheriff resign since that time, because how much Sheriff Bailey knew or did not know almost is not relevant. When you have allegations and you have incidents as horrible as the ones that have happened in Rankin County, I believe that speaks to your leadership. So you should step down. So this was before he even had the allegations that came to light about his girlfriend. But I think that Sheriff Bailey should resign, and I think investigations should continue.
Attorney General Fitch's office recently asked the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals to overturn a decision that found Mississippi's lifetime ban on voting for people convicted of felonies unconstitutional. Your reaction to that appeal, and how would your office handle criminal justice reform?
So the lifetime voting ban is completely unconstitutional. Very rarely do we get to say this, but the Fifth Circuit got it right. I don't care if it was a panel decision. I don't care if it was an en banc decision. I think appealing this shows just the level of disenfranchisement leaders like Lynn Fitch want to continue. If you have served your time and you have paid your debt to society, for lack of a better phrase, then transitioning back into community, you need to be able to vote. It's continued punishment. It's absolutely unconstitutional, and this is an appeal that should not have been pursued. I mean, we're talking, I believe the number is over 200,000 people who would gain voting rights if the Fifth Circuit's ruling stands. And in my opinion, they've given no good argument for pulling voting privileges away from people who have served their time. I mean, we're talking, one of the felonies that will remove your voting rights from you is writing a bad check. So one bad decision to write a bad check, and you once charged and served your sentence, you could lose your voting rights forever. And that just, if that is not unconstitutional, I don't know what is. As far as criminal justice reform with my administration, I absolutely believe that we should hold people accountable for serving crimes, for committing crimes. But what I do know is that Mississippi has an incarceration problem. We have overcrowded jails. We are holding people far too long for minimal charges. And we have one of the most dysfunctional Department of Corrections that I have ever seen, and I have worked very closely with monitoring and investigating that department. So I do know that I would have a very hands-on administration when it comes to corrections, because while criminal justice is important and putting criminals behind bars 100% important, we also have to look at how we are transitioning people into and out of correctional facilities. And honestly, we also have to look at mental health care, because those things are intrinsically intertwined. And so I think we would have an overall holistic approach of not just going after the criminals, but also ensuring that our correctional facilities are operating at a level that the people that transition out of correctional facilities need to be able to transition back into their communities fully and have those support services.
How would you address the issue of gun violence in the state while retaining Second Amendment rights of gun owners?
So I am pro Second Amendment. I am a gun owner. I'm the daughter of police officers, and so gun safety was very important in our household because my father wears a badge. He has a gun. He had guns in our home. But I'm also very, very proud to be a candidate of distinction for Moms Against Gun Violence, because we have a gun violence problem in this country and in this state. And I think there's a balance to be had there. I think there is common sense gun reform that we can put into place that will keep people safe, will keep guns out of the hands of people that do not need to have them in their possession, but also maintain people's Second Amendment rights. Look, this is not an issue I think we have to be divisive on. You can have it, they're not mutually exclusive, we can have it both ways. And I think one of the great things that people misunderstand about Democrats, especially Democrats in the South, is that we're not trying to take away people's guns. We understand that there's a Second Amendment right to bear arms, but we cannot turn a blind eye to the uptick in gun violence that we have seen over the past decade, because we have people dying, we have children dying. And so I think there is a balance that can be struck between gun safety and gun ownership.
When addressing violence as a whole, what initiatives could we see coming out of your office if elected to address maybe some other external factors that lead to violence?
Well, one of the things in our platform that we're really, really excited about is a legislative advisory council that would be established within the AG's office. I think for far too long, our Attorney General has stood on the sidelines during legislative session, before and after, and counseling lawmakers on what the AG's office is seeing across the state that needs to be put into legislation. And so I think this is where the rubber really meets the road between our sections of government, our branches of government. So I think the Legislative Advisory Council, what they would do is that would be a group within the AG's office that would take data that we're seeing across Mississippi regarding violence, regarding drug use, regarding all kinds of issues, and put together a legislative packet that is truly informed by what we're seeing on the ground, and monitor and help push that legislation through with lawmakers. So it's just really utilizing the AG's office as working alongside our legislature to make sure that we're getting laws that are effective for people in Mississippi.
You've been outspoken on better serving Mississippi's workers. What would you change with Mississippi's current labor laws?
Well, again, I think this goes back to being very strong, having a very strong presence in the Mississippi legislature through that Legislative Advisory Council. However, I have also added on my platform the development of a fair labor division, which I believe General Fitch says was not necessary. But my counter to that is, what supports do we have on the ground, whether through the AG's office or any other agency, for Mississippi workers? Not only to inform them on state labor laws, but also to ensure they are following federal employment and labor laws. So I think the development of that Fair Labor Division, having a dedicated group of advocates and attorneys for Mississippi workers and Mississippi employers, I think that will start filling that gap for Mississippians, because we do not have a dedicated Department of Labor. We do not have that state-funded support system for Mississippi workers or employees. So our employers, I think that's going to be a vital support system for Mississippians, along with working hand in hand with lawmakers to strengthen those labor and employment laws.
That's Greta Kemp Martin talking Wednesday with our own Richard Lake. If you missed last week's interview with Lynn Fitch, you can find it online on the Mississippi Insight page. Just look under the Politics tab at WJTV.com. And we'll be right back. If you have comments or questions about today's show or suggestion for an interview or segment, just drop us a line. Email our producers. The address is news@WJTV.com. Our thanks to Greta Kemp Martin for joining us this week. We'll be back next weekend with more of the political and current affairs coverage that you demand. I'm Byron Brown. From all of us here at 12 News, make it a great weekend.